right, we are live here for today's live edition of the New Warehouse podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and very timely that we have scheduled this live stream today, especially with all the news happening yesterday, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. And I'm going to be joined by Maggie Barnett, who's the CEO over at LVK Logistics, and she has been all over on top of this news as it's been developing, I think, all year, but certainly yesterday, referring to the Liberation Day, I guess, as it's been called, and all of these tariffs that are coming to light, and an announcement, and lots of uncertainty and confusion. So we're gonna kind of dive into it today with Maggie and hear her thoughts, some of her advice, what she's seeing from both the 3PL side and the brand side, and also learn a little bit, hopefully, on how we can navigate this uncertainty and how we can go about and maybe take some steps to help us maybe navigate as much as is possible right now. So Maggie, welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
Kevin, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to get talking after all of this news that's been coming down, especially in the last 12 hours or 24 hours.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, in the last 24 hours, it's been quite a ride on news, right, on the supply chain side. So I guess before we kick off, let's for people that aren't familiar with you, let's give a little background on that. Tell us a little bit about what you do and what LVK Fulfillment's all about.
Excellent. My name's Maggie Barnett. I'm the CEO of LVK. LVK is a full-service 3PL. We have 7 warehouses across North America. We do complex fulfillment. We only take on 5 to 7 customers a year. You know, I don't like to be in the commodity business. People say fulfillment's commodity, and I say, no, we do very complex things. We like to be sticky and go really deep with our partners, especially on the tech side. Our parent company is ShipHero, best in class WMS. Over 1,000 warehouses run that. You know, it's WMS, IMS, OMS. So yeah, I've been there for 7 years. So I'm having my 7-year anniversary. Okay. So hopefully I won't get that 7-year itch. I promised Aaron I'd stay around for a little bit longer, because with LVK kind of getting to run the next few years will be very, very exciting, especially in this climate where we can become really good partners with our brands.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, 7 is a lucky number, right? So maybe it's not a 7-year itch. Maybe it would just be 7 years of luck or something.
I'm good with that. We'll go with that one. We'll go with that one, Kevin.
Definitely. And maybe Aaron would like to hear that one better too, maybe, you know. Definitely. So thanks for joining me here today. And I think, you know, as we mentioned, super timely in terms of what's going on here within the fulfillment industry. I mean, I guess within the world in general, certainly, but for our side of the world, the supply chain side and fulfillment and e-commerce, certainly a lot happening. So I guess tell us a little bit from your perspective, like what has happened in the last 24 hours for maybe people that haven't seen it.
Yeah. So in the last 24 hours, you know, Liberation Day, the tariffs that the administration rolled out, they are severe. I think everyone can agree that it was bigger than we thought it would be, and that it was more widespread. In our business, and to back up a little bit too, we knew this was coming, right? We knew that tariffs were coming. That was the whole agenda during the campaign. So we knew it was coming. For a lot of our brands who also leverage Section 321, which is the de minimis, you know, there was a lot of things to be thinking about. There's tariffs going up, which is, you know, there's a lot of complexity around that and a lot of fear around that, but also 321, the de minimis going away for China. Like that was on February 1st, that was pretty much killed. They tried to implement it on the 4th, and I could be off by a day, but, you know, beginning of February. And then by the 7th, they couldn't collect on all of the duties. So they put a pause on it because a lot of packages were just, you know, dust was accumulating on them where they were stuck at JFK. So we knew the de minimis was basically going to be, you know, stopped for China. the big news from yesterday when it comes to e-commerce, because again, we could talk about so many facets of this. Like, I don't know anything about cars or aluminum or natural
Right.
gas,
Yeah.
timber. Kevin, I think, we'll stick with e-commerce.
Yeah.
The fact that the reading of it, like the reading of it, it's not that clear, but the reading of it definitely seems like the de minimis is going away for all countries, not just China.
Mm.
Like when read in conjunction, there's like this little part H and it references part A. So that idea that those brands who were avoiding duties and taxes by shipping these items in either directly from Vietnam or China, or, maybe they put a full container in Canada or Mexico and then did one shipment across, leveraging the de minimis. Again, they were saving 30-40% by not paying those tariffs. Like, that most likely will go away. That's what the letter of, I shouldn't say the law, that's what the fact sheet is outlined.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's interesting too because there was a lot of I think fear right around having production in China or shipping out of China, right? And so a lot of people moved from China or were in the process of doing that to try and mitigate that risk. And I think I saw. Curious what you saw too. I mean, that I think a lot of people were moving to like Vietnam was like a kind of a top spot, and then Vietnam, I think they announced yesterday, got hit with like 46% tariff or something like that. So tell us a little bit about kind of that scramble in a sense, and what that means for people that were trying to leverage other countries and now are in the same boat essentially as if they were in China.
It's a great question, Kevin, because the idea over the last 2 years, the strategy has nothing to do with the current administration, but we all knew that China was getting too hot, that there would be something around it. So everyone developed this idea of the China plus one strategy. Keep your supply chain in China for the time being, find an alternative that probably wouldn't get hit with something like this. So, and that could have been because of tariffs, because of investment, just overall, there was some weakness around just having China. So people thought Bangladesh, Vietnam, and that's where to go. So many of our brands and a lot of people that I talk to, especially in the apparel and fashion industry, said Vietnam is the place.
Mm.
Well, with these tariffs coming in at 46%, and also we need to caution, like, this is a fact sheet.
Yeah.
There's going to be calls. I would not recommend anyone switching up their supply chain immediately, because who knows, Vietnam could call DC today and they like, actually it's 26. I mean, still a hit. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Well, we've seen right with like Canada and Mexico, for example. It's like, oh, this is what happened. And then 3 days later, it's like, oh, well, pause, right? So it is very like up in the air.
Yeah, so that's what we're telling people. We have to have backup plans. We have to have a strategy moving forward, but we also don't want to make massive moves too quickly because things could change. But definitely that Vietnam, that 46% was shocking for anyone who does wholesale. And I know like brands like Everlane, I know they're basically based out of there. They were doing 321 as well, where they would ship it. And I only know this because I'm a consumer. I buy their items. I would get
nice
it.
stuff.
Yeah. It was nice stuff. It was, right around the right price point. It'll probably get more expensive now. Goes into Toronto, and I saw that they use like a Wizmo to bring it down into, so they were leveraging 321. So if there's two pieces where they get hit, now it's when they bring things in wholesale, it's going to be the 46% allegedly, and any of the 321 action they were able to get for the direct consumer business, because they also have stores, so that's where they would do the wholesale, that they were able to not pay any tariffs on that. And it could seem once they get the actual way of collecting this out of the way, like the government actually puts together, has a system in place, then those countries may get hit as well. So that would be it's like a double whammy, Kevin.
Yeah.
That's how we're seeing it. Is just like, okay, like we got to take a pause and take a breath. But that's definitely that's big news.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's an interesting point there. You said a couple times where it's one thing like that they're saying like, okay, we're going to put these tariffs on, but then there's a whole system in place, right, that needs to go through, like, how are we actually going to collect these and track these things and be able to do that. So it'd be interesting to see how they kind of figure that part out and navigate that, right? So now you mentioned they're kind of on the brand side a little bit. Obviously the manufacturing has been such a core part of the supply chain that's been outsourced to other countries, and that's where like a lot of that impact is going to be felt. But tell us a little bit about what are you hearing? I mean, what is LVK experiencing themselves? But on the 3PL side, I mean, because there's a lot of I think scramble. I mean, anytime there's like some big tariff announcements I see on LinkedIn, like all the 3PLs posting like, oh, if you need to relocate your fulfillment services, we got you, right? Basically.
Yeah.
But what's really happening on the 3PL side? I mean, is there a big impact for 3PLs, and in what way?
There is going to be a lot of movement in US 3PLs. I
Mm,
think, the impetus of this with the administration, they want to do three things. The narrative of fentanyl is real. Like they want to
mm,
make sure that has some clasp around it. They want external revenue, and they want more jobs in America. Bringing Getting rid of the de minimis in general, and also that, like, that's the main thing I think that's going to make a lot of the changes here happen, because instead of going direct from China or direct from Vietnam, like, why would you do that if there's no de minimis?
yeah.
Like, because you're going to have to pay the higher tariff. Even with some tariff engineering, it just doesn't make sense. Like, so you need a US 3PL. There's a lot of folks, using 3PLs in Mexico and Canada. We even we do 321 out of Canada. And now they're interviewing US 3PLs. So there will be a surge in 3PL volume. Like, people will be setting up their own 3PLs in the US. I think it's similar to like truck brokerage, like during COVID, like everyone all of a sudden was a trucker,
Yeah.
because there was just like people needed things moved. So I think there will be like this bump of entrepreneurs who will be opening up 3PLs, and we can see it on the software on the SaaS side. Like Ship Hero is the easiest out of the box, like WMS to use. Like it's the barrier to set up a 3PL is very low.
Hmm.
It's difficult and there's a lot of risk associated with it, but it's not impossible. You're not setting up a manufacturing plant. You just need four walls and internet. So that's where I feel like there's going to be a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs in the 3PL space. I think there's also going to be a lot of brands that I'm talking to that this is when you pay for a 3PL in Mexico to pick and pack your item, it's like 50 cents. Like
Yeah.
it. So not only were those companies, brands getting the leverage of the de minimis, but they're not used to paying for labor like this. So in the
Mm,
US, pick and pack, it's $1.50, $2.50, depending on where it is, and how else they get you on some of those costs. That's where I think the brands are really going to get hurt. So I think it's going to help 3PLs. There's going to be like a wash of like there's going to be an expansion of 3PLs and warehouse providers, and the need for capacity in the US, because no one will need to go direct. I mean, they can go direct, but there's really no benefit of that.
yeah.
And there are also, these brands are going to have a little bit of sticker shock. Like when I'm giving some pricing to brands, especially in the apparel, they're like, wait, I'm used to paying 50 cents for this. And I'm like, that's, it's a different ball game now, because like we run a profitable ship. There's 3PLs out
Mhm.
there, Kevin, that are going to give everything away.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I tell brands too. Like, they're going to bait and switch you. Like, they're going to say it costs 75 cents, but it's just not reality. That's not, we know, like, I know what the technology I use, I know how much it costs to ship an item. And if someone says it's 50 cents, uh,
Yeah. There's
that's,
no way. Yeah.
there's no way. or
Yeah.
it's just not sustainable. They're getting you on the label costs, increasing the labels, like they're getting you somewhere else. Or they'll go out of business, which hopefully I don't want anyone to do that, but I'm just saying, like, they just don't know the economics of it. But yeah, those are the big takeaways. There's going to be, more, there's going to be a need for 3PL capacity in the US because of this.
Mm. That's very interesting. Yeah, because I think, last year I certainly saw a lot of, I guess, takes or discussion around the idea of like the 3PL market consolidating almost and shrinking. So you're saying that you think that more 3PLs are going to be created, and there's kind of like an opportunity here for US based 3PLs to either expand capacity or just start a new business, which I think is really interesting. And And yeah, to your point, I mean, it's kind of an easy startup, right? If you have space and you have some internet, I mean, it's certainly not as easy as just moving some boxes
Yeah.
around, as some people will generalize it as. Yeah, but definitely very interesting there. Yeah, you want to
Yeah,
say?
and I think there's some nuance to that. I think there will be some
Mm.
consolidation
Okay.
where some older players might say like, "Hey, I'm done running a 3PL," and they'll start to get bundled in some larger 3PL networks, like, generational type 3PLs, and I definitely see that happening. I do think there'll be some new entrants, but I think the main takeaway is that there's going to be a need for more 3PL work to be done. So there will be consolidation, but I think the new entrants are interesting, and the entrepreneurs out there have a cool field that they can get into, and
Mm.
make some money. Or you'll see brands opening up, like maybe vertical integration comes back. Like I was
Yeah.
trying to find some details on American Apparel and like who else is producing, like Reformation, a fashion brand.
Yeah.
They still do a lot of manufacturing in California, but like maybe there'll be some new business models that come out of this as well around apparel.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting too, and that reminds me of when American Eagle tried to they did the acquisition of Quiet, and they were trying to like streamline the supply chain for their competitors and all these things. And I wonder if this, and I think they were a little early to try and do something like that, so I didn't quite work out, right? But maybe that's an opportunity, like you said, for like these brands of like, well, how can we do manufacturing, but maybe we also share manufacturing space with somebody else, and how do we figure that out, even though we might be competitors, but we can still kind of like streamline this and reap the benefits on both sides. I think that'd be an interesting opportunity potentially. I'm curious because you mentioned about the labor costs, right, where people are doing fulfillment, and it's like 50 cents in Mexico versus here it's like $1.50 to 2.50. um do you think that the labor is gonna be there to support and do these things, or is it gonna drive more towards automation or better software, or more reliance on like tech to try and navigate that?
It's a really good question, Kevin. And I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle.
Mm.
Automation, and again, I'm talking about direct to consumer e-commerce, like high volume, multi-tenant warehouse. That's my sweet spot. That's where
Right.
I can like speak to most effectively.
Mhm.
You can do lightweight automation and it works great. We have pick to light carts, we have pack to light carts, we have receive to light. Like those lightweight investments of a couple grand a cart pay dividends. Like it's
Mm.
fantastic. We like to call it attainable automation. I think that's where you'll see a big upswing. I don't think you see people investing millions of dollars. Again, this is SMB mid market, millions and millions of dollars on a robotics company for this kind of fast multi tenant. It's not as repetitive, these picks, and there's going to be a lot of leverage the smaller and mid-sized 3PLs can take on by just this lightweight automation. So you still need people, and you just have people
Right.
not doing so much of the repetitive work, and you're able to monitor how long stuff actually takes. So I think leveraging technology when it comes to what are my actual costs, because again, in a commodity business, and most 3PL is commodity, the winner knows their cost best.
Mhm.
And having software that's able to do that with labor cost dashboards is key. Then the second part is attainable automation, where you're able to use automation, but not have to set up, intensive, warehouse mappings that take, I can see for 500,000 square feet, absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a lot of SMB mid markets that don't need that 5-year commitment and like millions of dollars to get set up. Like I wouldn't do that right now for people, because we don't know what's going to happen, right? Like
Mm. Yeah.
that's a very large investment to make, especially if you're just like an entrepreneur. So
Yeah.
I do think there's going to be more jobs. I think there's folks that we partner with InstaWork, and we have a very like, when speaking with them, and they're the experts when it comes to labor,
Yeah.
in the right markets, you'll be fine. Like Lafayette, Indiana can be tough to get labor in, but like Allentown, Pennsylvania, fine. Jacksonville,
Mhm.
Florida, fine. Dallas, Fort Worth, fine. So there's different pockets. That's very city to city. And the other point, and I'm sorry, this is the fourth point that I think is so important, is
Mm.
that the technology, if the technology is really good, you can leverage temp work. You don't
Right.
need all this institutional knowledge because you can train them in 15 to 20 minutes, get them rolling. And I think that's the key too, to be able to flex like that. Um, so those are, I think, some of the things people should be thinking about. It's like, if you have the technology, then you can get temps. You don't need as many full-time employees, but your full-time employees have to be rock stars. Like my full-time
Yeah.
employees are absolute rock stars. Like I wouldn't trade them for the world. And then when we need to flex up, the technology helps so that the temps can get up to speed very quickly. So I think that, to me, that's the game plan.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a great point because the investment should be on that user experience, right? And the ease of training, ease to get up to speed quickly that allows you to have that flexibility, right? Which I think in these kind of uncertain times, right? We need to be as flexible as possible, and I think that's a kind of a great segue into my next question here, where I saw you talking about optionality, right, versus kind of optimization. And that's what people are kind of looking for right now. And I know you were at Manifest and recently Shop Talk as well. So I'm curious, what are people saying there, or what were they looking for in terms of that optionality? Like what did that mean to them, and how are they kind of navigating that?
It, it's very interesting, Kevin, how people are approaching this, where I think there was so much private equity and so much VC and so much money flowing through supply chain, and especially e-commerce, with COVID. And then everyone was like, okay, great. We have like top line, top line, top line.
Mm,
Then everything kind of fell off. So the idea that the profitability aspect became so intense that people optimized themselves to death, where they had no options
mm,
because they were so worried about being able to give feedback to investors and to really, make their businesses work. Like they had to just cut so close to the bone. And then now they're like, wait, I don't have any options. I only send something direct from China. I only send something direct from Vietnam. And that's not going to work anymore. So there's a few things they're looking at. They have to say, well, can I have a hybrid model? I'm helping fashion companies right now say, like, all right, here's your hybrid model. You can ship things via ocean that are your evergreen SKUs. These are like a trench coat, a nice bag, a scarf, things that don't go out of style, Kevin. And
mm,
then they're capsules, they can air ship and we can ship out quickly. So that optionality to be able to work with a 3PL that will listen to you and kind of work through these ideas and concepts and say, like, hey, it's not one size fits all. So there's the optionality and like how things actually get fulfilled. Everything doesn't have to be ocean, doesn't have to be air. Like you can kind of mix and match, and also have a couple providers, like kick the tires on this in the
mm,
sense of, if you have someone doing Canada for you or Mexico doing 321 in because the country of origin is not China and you're still going to let that run, let it run. But talk to a 3PL in the US, like have some backup plans and just start understanding those conversations, or start having those conversations and understanding what partners could look like. So Manifest, that was the big takeaway, is
mm.
like, do not go all in on one on one strategy,
Yeah.
because it's going to probably change or need to change due to things you can't control.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's a very interesting time, right? Because that was kind of like the mantra for some time was like optimize, optimize, optimize. We're gonna be as optimized as possible. Right now, it's kind of like, well, like you said, like, whoa, we optimized so much, and now we don't have options. Like if something happens, right? So how do we get those options? And I'm curious your thoughts on. So I recently talked to we had on the podcast Andrew from Dr. Squatch, and he was talking about how they use multiple 3PLs for like different parts of their business, which is kind of more of a diversified, I guess, strategy, right? So, what are your thoughts on that? Like using multiple 3PLs in this scenario, do you think that having more than one partner would be beneficial or a little too tricky? What do you think?
I think it comes down to size. Like when you think about having multiple fulfillment partners, it comes down to how much volume are you doing? How
Mm,
complex is your suite of SKUs? Are you doing international and that's why you need other partners? I think there's a good analysis that needs to be done for each brand. Where I see most people divide is B2B. Like they have a fulfillment house for all their B2B, and then they have a fulfillment house for their D2C, because there's very few 3PLs that do both extremely well.
Yeah.
And if someone says we do both exactly the same, like a flag.
Is that a red flag? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a red flag. Like LBK, direct to consumer, fantastic. We're on Shapiro, they're direct to consumer first, fantastic. I think when it comes to wholesale, we're getting really good at it, but like there's Siva out there. Like that's all they do. Like, of course, if you just have a wholesale rotation, we will get to the point as a company where we will be best in breed on both sides, but it takes time. And right now, I think that's the easiest delineation for people to split if they feel like they need to, is to split between the B2B and the direct consumer, or an international 3PL to do, like a lot of folks come to us in Canada, or they used to come to, we don't allow it as much anymore, just to do the Canada shipments, versus their US volume. So there's a couple ways to do it. And I think at the end of the day, if the brand moves a lot of volume, they'll make the decisions. We can always help them and give them advice through that. But really it's up to them how they feel most comfortable. So we're really good with hybrid options. That's another option that I think, Kevin, people don't realize. Like we will work with someone who has their own facility in California and they ship out kind of their more bespoke, they do all the returns there and ship out more bespoke, personalized items. Then we do all of their high volume SKUs. And since they're on Shapiro as well, it works out perfectly. And they, like anything that needs to go to the East Coast, we take care of. So like those, like, I think everyone's going to reframe, just getting smarter. And again, not trying to starve 3PLs or penny pinch to where, no one's having a good time, but just getting smarter about the approach. I think that's what I'm really hoping. I'm seeing a lot of smart brands do it, but there's always the people who are still going to want to optimize. But again, optimization is not bad. Optimization is not bad. But I think it's the idea of like, when you starve a 3PL, like that's not a good relationship. So I think that's also something folks need to kind of constantly revisit. Like, don't starve your partners, because you're going to need that at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting there. You said like, how they're being smart about it and being a little more strategic with that hybrid model. I think is really an interesting thing too. Like maybe there's some more high touch because I know that's one thing that sometimes brands struggle with is like, oh, we're giving control to the 3PL a little bit. And I think that's a great point where you said, maybe they have their own and it's like, okay, well, we do returns here. We do more high touch things here where we want more control over. We want to be able to run out into the warehouse, maybe from the office and, do something like specific for a special order. But that high volume, those top SKUs that we know are just, repeatable, essentially, like let's outsource that. And I think that makes a lot of sense to do that. So, very interesting perspectives here from you, and anybody that's listening in too, feel free to, I see we have some comments kind of like cheering Maggie on here, and Aaron wants to debate on who's the best dad. So maybe that'll be the next, live stream we'll do here. But if anybody has any questions or thoughts, would love to see those in the comments as well. But Maggie, I wanted to talk to you too, because you mentioned fashion a couple times here, and I think you like fashion. Maybe is what I'm gathering here. You certainly like LVK fashion. I can see that here on
a uniform.
Screen. I mean, down to the thermos there. I mean,
yeah, it's never. We have to be very proud of our brand. It's a baby brand.
Of course, yes. And so I saw you have put out an article. I think it was yesterday or the day before, that was talking about the fast fashion world and kind of what may be happening to that world with these tariffs. So tell us a little bit about that and kind of your thoughts and your perspective on what may be happening there.
Fashion, I think, is so interesting when it comes to logistics. With all of these tariffs, 60% of the fashion that we consume, of the apparel that we consume in the US, is made in China, Indonesia, and Vietnam. So that's a huge, and look what the tariffs just came out with. So they're going to be hit very hard. Working with some folks, I could even see when it comes to shoes, like with the way it was laid out yesterday, like your shoes are going to be 15% more on the top line. Like when you hit all of those items, because so many are made in Vietnam. So fashion has had a rough year, a rough couple of years when it comes to making margin. Number one, you have the tariffs coming up and de minimis going away. You have USPS under a pound, and just the increasing carrier rates in general. Um, Fast fashion has also just like the competition. There's just been so many entrants because of TikTok Shop and a few other modes where people can really there's so much of it now. There's so much noise. So those three items, the changing in carrier price, the changing in tariff, and just the inundation of brands, it's been really hard to stand out. So I think when it comes to like fast fashion, and there's the other extreme that a lot of magazines talk about, like the idea of like slow tide and slow fashion. I think there's something in the middle that we're exploring of like this hybrid approach. It's using ocean for your evergreen SKUs. It's using air for your capsules. So we are being really flexible. And I think that's what 3PLs have to be. And technology around your supply chain has to be flexible, and it's not one size fits all anymore. It's getting really smart about what you want to produce, how much of it you want to produce, and how you can build that kind of cult following around a brand. Because it's not just about slinging apparel anymore. Like having that community, that cult around it, that's what people are going to stay with, even if your prices go up a little bit. Because like a white t-shirt, what's exciting about that? If it's like the best high quality white t-shirt that never stains, and I spill a lot of things, it's like it has to, you either have to be unique or have like a cult following. So that's what the article describes, is like fashion is going to need to really think hard about what they're making and how they're going to sell it and how they're going to get it to that customer, and really making that customer feel good about it, because we just have so many options now. I think that, to me, that's like the interesting, hard, complex problem to solve, is apparel logistics and how the fashion brands are going to be handling that. So it's a long article. I think it says 7 minutes to read, or 8, but we had a lot of fun with it, and we talked to a lot of fashion brands. So to me, that's going to be the thing to solve, because even if we don't want to buy a lot of new stuff, we usually need to buy new clothes just because we're using them. So there's a lot of good threads there to dig into.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's interesting because we have kind of, back, like, I guess back in the day, right? We used to like try and buy like high quality like clothing items that would last a long time. We had, like these tough jeans and things that we use for working and things like that. And we've certainly transitioned. And I think certainly like the younger generations too, like from a Gen Z, what's the one after? I think Gen Alpha, right? I think is the one after that, maybe. They've certainly been more focused on like, ooh, how do I have a new fit, right, or this and that, which kind of leans itself to this fast fashion, and getting items for cheap, and then maybe wear them a couple times, or they don't even like survive the wash, right? in some cases, right? And now it's like I'd be interested to see, do we transition back to like that idea of buying a more high quality item that's gonna last longer? Because now the fast fashion, like one of the advantages they had was obviously like the lower price, right? So if that lower price becomes higher now, then is it like the gap gets smaller between just buying a high quality item versus like this low quality quick turn kind of item that I'm gonna wear maybe once, maybe twice, like, and just get my Instagram picture out there, and that's it. So I'm curious, what do you think about that?
Kevin, I think you're spot on. I live in downtown Manhattan, and what I can see, all the retail stores have kind of cleared out, and there's thrift stores. There's a huge comeback to thrifting. I mean, like, I haven't seen since I moved here, in the late 90s. So I think the idea that there's, of course, Gen Z and a lot of folks that want that fast fashion, but they're going to see the prices go up, and they're going to say, you know what? I don't want to have to buy the same pair of jeans over and over again. Like, let me go into quality. And I bring up the kind of more, the thrifting, because most of that stuff is made really well, because it's something that's old that has somehow stood the test of time. Like, I see all my 90s t-shirts coming back. It's like the Benetton, it's there's that resurgence in it because it is very high quality. And I think the fashion brands also, with the consumer, are also thinking about the environment. So one, I think they're going to try to make things that are, heavy duty, will last longer, pieces that you'll hold on for a long time, mix them with some fast fashion stuff, even if it is a little bit more pricey, and really thinking through the environmental aspects of it too. Because one thing Shein and Temu did, this idea of not just like print on demand, but really anticipating sales ahead of time so they don't make too much,
Mm.
is better for the environment. Like, of course, they're
Yeah.
putting everything in the air, and tons of carbon is being emitted to get it to us on a daily basis. But I think the fashion industry was also really, you know, took a couple knocks because of that environmental aspect of just printing all these things that no one ever bought.
Mm.
So I think we're going to move into a very like more of a sophisticated, clear vision with these fashion brands that hang around about how much they're going to produce and like what they're going to produce, so that people actually get some longevity out of the clothes, and also the environmental piece. So I think I think our consumers are getting smart, and there's so much available data.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting once, that kind of that visibility and awareness comes there, because I'm a adjunct professor and I teach, Gen Z students in college right now. And whenever I bring up in our class about returns, right, and the massive waste that there is like happening, and I say like, oh well, stuff didn't sell, but brands want to keep the brand integrity, so they're just burning it like out in a some random field in a random country somewhere, right? They're like, what, really?
Yeah.
Like they can't believe all that goes into that idea, because I think that as consumers they've come up with such ease and convenience, right, that it's like, oh, there's so many options for me, and if I don't like it, like I can return it, no problem, and I just never think of it again, right? But there is such an impact there, as you said. So it will be interesting to see kind of how that perception changes a little bit, especially as there's more awareness around that, and also how these upcoming kind of digital generations, right, that are used to the convenience, like how will they also react to these things, whether it's based on price or just the way the supply chain changes because some of these factors as well. I think it'll be interesting to see how that develops. So very interesting to talk to you here today, Maggie, and really appreciate you joining me. I want to close out with one more question here. So if we are looking at kind of this uncertainty in the market right now, and we're not quite sure, we know that these tariffs are coming. We don't quite know, as we said earlier, where exactly will the numbers settle, but they're certainly probably not going to be at zero, right? So this uncertainty, what is like the one takeaway, one first step you would advise somebody, whether they're a 3PL or a brand, to take to be able to prepare and kind of be able to handle this upcoming or ongoing uncertainty?
Yeah, Kevin, I think because everyone's situation is so different, right?
Mm.
Where they're, how much cash flow they have, how much inventory on hand they have, where they produce. I think the first piece of advice is very simple: is to take a breath and know that you've made it this far, and we've got to be calm, cool, and collected to like interview new partners and find a new path forward. I think the people that I see making very quick changes, and oh, I'm going to throw all my inventory here, and then I'm going to move it here, and then I'm going to do this, like
Mm.
they're doing all these short-term anxiety fueled decisions. I think taking a breath and kind of understanding what they can do, talking to the experts, talking to multiple partners, that clear headedness is going to, that's what's going to keep you in business for 3, 5, 10, 15 years,
Mm.
not these short term little ideas. I know there's going to be a lot of people that rush into Canada to try to leverage 321 if their items were made in Vietnam. There's going to be that hustle and bustle for the next 90 days. I get that. And some people should do it if they can make some money. However, like taking that deep breath and saying, okay, what are my options? And not getting bullied by one of your providers, because that's also like, this is the time to really understand your options and to keep focused and keep a clear head.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that advice. I think is very smart, because at the end of the day, like you said, 3 to 5 years, we want to last that long, right? As a company, hopefully longer too, as well. But creating any kind of disruption, and chaos in a sense, a little bit internally. I mean, that's gonna potentially bleed out to those customers, right? And it's going to impact that customer experience. So even though it may cost a little more, like you want to still maintain that customer relationship and that long-term value there as well. So great advice there, and great information, insights from you here in the conversation. Oh, we did have one question here in the comments just popped up. Maggie, can you drop your skincare routine? Wow. Well, she is glowing. I'll say definitely. So
I'll leave it in the notes on LinkedIn.
there we go. There we go. So it's a great tee up there. If people want to get in touch with you or they want to learn more about LVK fulfillment or your skincare routine, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, lvk.com is where you can figure everything out. I'm Maggie at lvk.com, and happy to answer any questions and go deep on any of these things. This is what we love to do. And Kevin, thank you so much for having me. And it was fun that we got to do this right off the tail of some big announcements.
Yeah, absolutely. Great timing. And I will say we scheduled this like a month ago. So it wasn't like, oh, hey, let's jump on real quick and talk about this coming up, right? So definitely great timing, and really appreciate that you could join me today and have this discussion. Very insightful, and hopefully delivered a lot of value for the audience and future viewers as well. So Maggie, thank you very much for your time, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Take care.